In this video, we want to look at the vocabulary for polynomial expressions. So first, let me write out a polynomial expression. Here's an example. 2x cubed plus 5x squared minus x plus 4. Now, I called this a polynomial. And if you know your Latin, poly means many. So first of all, what is a monomial? So if I wanted to know what a monomial is, a good example would just be 5x squared. Notice it has one term, whereas what we have in the polynomial has four terms. An example of a binomial would be if I had something like 2x cubed minus x. That would be a binomial, because there are two terms. When we get to three terms, we could call it a trinomial, but in general, we just start to call things polynomials once we end up getting more than two terms. So this is a polynomial that we're looking at. Now let's consider the meaning of things. Okay, first of all, we have some numbers written in front of the variables. So 2 is called a coefficient. Okay, the 2 in front of the x cubed means that we have 2 x cubes, or 2 times x cubed. The 5 in front of the x squared means we have 5 times x squared. Now, when we look at this, we have two more terms, and I don't see any coefficient in the third term, and I don't see any variable in the last term. So anyhow, what is the coefficient for the third term? If I had wanted to, I could have written the expression as 2x cubed plus 5x squared minus 1 times x plus 4. So even though we don't write it out, there's an implied coefficient of 1 on the third term. Okay. Now another thing to note is x cubed is not like x squared. So we didn't combine the 5x cubed and the 2x cubed and the 5x squared, and x squared is not like x, and none of those are like the number 4. So those terms cannot be combined because we know in addition we can only combine like terms. Now let's go a step further and let's consider the exponents. So on the first term we have an exponent of 3, and hopefully you remember that x cubed means we literally have 3 factors of x. We just don't want to write out x times x times x, so we write x cubed. On the second term, the 2 represents that we have 2 factors of x. And as you can see, 2 factors of x is not the same as 3 factors of x, which is why we didn't combine them. Now, if we keep on going in the third term, we didn't write out how many factors of x we have as an exponent because it's implied that it is 1 factor of x. So we never write that there's 1 factor of x. And continuing onward, if you looked at the term with the 4, it is in fact, there is an x behind it to the 0th power. We have no factors of x on the last term. So every term does in fact have a number of factors of x, but when you have a constant term like 4, we say that it's multiplied by no factors of x. So we have a vocabulary word, though, to talk about the number of factors. We use the word degree. So the first term, 2x cubed, has a degree of 3 because you have x written out 3 times. X squared has a degree of 2. The term minus x has a degree of 1, and the constant term 4 has a degree of 0. Now, we're not going to explore this in detail in this section, but if I had things like 2x squared y, we would actually add up. There would be an implied 1 on the y, and we would add up the exponents on all of the variables, so we would say that this has a degree of 3. We're not going to consider anything with multiple variables for now. Okay, so continuing on, when we have a polynomial, it makes sense to write things in an order. So let me clear out what I have here and start writing from the beginning. Let's rewrite 2x cubed plus 5x squared minus x plus 4. There are a lot of ways that I could write this, okay? But there are only two ways that really make logical sense. This would be the same as if I had said I had 4 minus x plus 5x squared plus 2x cubed. Either way that I write it, the term with the highest exponent is the 2x cubed term. And since that has a degree of 3, we say the polynomial itself is degree 3. We go with the largest degree available. Okay, and in the first case on the left, we wrote this from the highest degree down to the lowest degree. So on the left, we wrote it in descending order. We started with the highest degree term and went to the lowest degree term. On the right, we went in ascending order because we started with the lowest degree term, because remember 4 could be multiplied times x to the 0, so it's the 0th degree term, and we ended with the 3rd degree term. A couple other vocabulary things. When you have an x squared to the second power, we usually call that squared. And when you have a variable to the third power, we usually say that it is cubed. So those are alternative ways of saying the same thing. Now let's just wrap up this video by considering one more polynomial. Let's consider 5 plus 2x minus x cubed. So what are some of the things that we can say about this? We can say that it is ascending. We can say that it is degree 3. We can say things like the cubic term has an implied coefficient of 1. The x term has a coefficient of 2, and the constant term has a coefficient of 5. We also might note when we look at this one that there's a missing term. Okay, we don't have an x squared term in here. Okay, we could rewrite the whole thing with an x squared term if we wanted to. We could keep it in ascending order. Plus, now I'm going to leave a little blank in front of the x squared term, minus x cubed. As long as I put 0 times x squared there, we have an equivalent expression. So when you have a missing term, it's the same as if that term were multiplied by 0. So it's like having a 0 coefficient for that term. So you often see polynomials with missing terms, and that just means, think about leaving a space there in your mind, but there's a coefficient of 0 for that particular degree of the variable.